Hello and welcome to the 13th episode of the Fireside Chat. Today we are talking about Gridcoin economics and magnitude in particular. This Fireside Chat is a get-together of Gridcoin community participants every week, every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, midnight UTC, on the Gridcoin Discord server hosted by myself, Jay Ringo, our friend down below, the Goblin Popper.
Hello.
And I like Chalk at holding down the corner as always.
Hey.
Before we get into the main topic, let's do some news really quick. There's a new proposal and pull out in the client. It is running till August 1st. It is having to do with a completely new GUI design. Pretty sure from the ground up, or pretty close to the ground up. You can find links to the GitHub discussion thread where all the images are being posted as they're being made. I think it looks pretty neat, pretty professional, nicely put together. And we are asking for $2,000 in a Gridcoin equivalent to pay the designer. And then we're also asking for $500 to pay Josh for his branding work, which we are using to complete the design, and then another $100 to pay Matt for his help with the color palette. So we're asking $2,600 from the foundation to pay for a new wallet design. Check it out in the polls section, or is it the vote section? What's it labeled? Voting. Check it out in the voting section on the client and give it a vote by August 1st. If you have any questions, post it on the Reddit thread, GitHub thread, CC Talk thread, or Steam thread, and someone will get back to you. Does anyone have any questions right here about that? Cool. Other than that, just a quick update on how we are handling GDPR. We are still waiting for World Community Grid to get their agreement together and get that over to us. We can sign it with Einstein at home, which is the other GDPR project. We are moving along nicely, and with any luck, that will be getting brought back soon. That's a trademark quote from Barton, but no, we don't know exactly when, but we have, I think, the token, and we just need to sort out some stuff on the back end and get that update out before we can bring Einstein back into the whitelist. And those are the only two GDPR projects right now. Any thoughts on that? This is so easy, guys. We can go straight into the topic then, I guess, unless anyone has anything else they want to bring up.
I will say, in terms of news, I mean, it's not super exciting, but it kind of has some indications and some. So anyway, I think it's the Bank of St. Louis. So the Federal Reserve of Bank of St. Louis added cryptocurrency prices to its database in terms of like value tracking, so people can use that for pretty much like analysis if they were trying to do analyses over time for all that fun stuff. I'm trying to figure out words today. I'm sorry, I've been talking a lot today. There's a now Bank of St. Louis added those things to its database. So there you go.
More and more acceptance to cryptocurrency.
Did you guys hear the Supreme Court even mention Bitcoin in its ruling today?
What was the ruling about? I probably should know this, but that's.
I don't. You know what? I hate to say I don't remember the case, but I remember reading a snippet that said that they mentioned cryptocurrency in terms of forms of currency. You know what? I'll look it up while we're talking.
I wonder who said it.
I think one of the judges.
Yeah, which one, man? I bet you it was
the old one.
All right, you know what? I'm just gonna answer Snip's question. No, it's not gonna be an mandatory update. Oh, he's asking for Einstein. Yeah, not gonna be mandatory update. Neither the UI design or the GDPR fix will be a mandatory update, but the GUI design is far down the road. Cool. Then let's get into the topic for today. We're talking basically the economics of Gridcoin with magnitude. We had an episode describing what magnitude was and why we have it. I think that's episode 5-ish. It is called Magnitude. You can find it in the playlist. And now I was thinking this discussion could be more about what it does economically. Like we have Gridcoin as an ecosystem, and we need to figure out ways to make it a viable and sustainable ecosystem. Jim, you've actually talked about this a couple times. The thing with magnitude is we have a static number, 115,000 magnitude split among all approved BOINC projects. And as more people come in to the platform, we are reducing the amount of each. We're splitting that magnitude over more number of people, and it's just it seems like a pretty relevant scaling issue. So I don't know why do we have 115,000, and is there anything we can do besides that to is there any system we could put in place besides just a static 115,000? I don't have anything off the top of my head, but Barton and myself, mostly Barton, did a bunch of digging last night, and we found the old magnitude system used to actually be dynamic, and then it was put into a static number. So it seems like it was part of the code back in the day.
So are you asking if are you asking my opinion on whether or not we should have a number increasing of set GRC in circulation, and if we should bring that to 0, or if we should have a dynamic as opposed to static number constantly increasing?
I think it's either questions. I don't personally know myself. I mean, we've got the CBR now. We've got the amount of Gridcoin we're minting to researchers and amount of Gridcoin we're minting to stakers all settled out. And that I think is one aspect of the ecosystem. And now magnitude, I think, is another fairly large aspect of the ecosystem. Yeah, do we want a dynamic system? What would a dynamic system do? Do we want a static system? What are the results of a static system? Yeah, I think those are the questions.
I'm not sure that a dynamic magnitude system makes any sense without a dynamic kitty. So, I mean...
Can we define kitty besides a cute animal?
That's the amount of Gridcoin that's essentially minted by the network, on a daily basis, right? So right now it stands at about 28,000 Gridcoins per day. And I won't go through the equilibrium math. The max emission that's set in the code is, I think, 50,500, and then there's a smoothing algorithm that averages everything over a 14-day period that introduces a feedback loop to smooth it, and it ends up being 5/9 of the max emission, and so that comes out to about 28,000 Gridcoins a day. So that's the number of Gridcoins that are actually awarded to all the research participants on a daily basis.
And that's research participation, not necessarily staking, not including
right.
Staking.
The interest is a totally separate thing, right?
Okay.
So, yeah.
So is that sustainable? As we get more people, we're giving out the same number of Gridcoin to more people. So as someone new, it's more difficult to earn Gridcoin in the future. And unless the value rises, the price, rises with the adoption rate, then it seems like it's kind of an unsustainable model.
I mean, yes and no, right? It's you don't want to make it impossible for newcomers to require to get GRC in order to actually even participate to begin with, because a lot of people see that as a buy-in system. But at the same time, you don't want to undermine the people who have tens of thousands of dollars of GRC at this point, even at 2.8 cents, and say, yeah, we're gonna keep minting as much as we can so that new people don't feel ostracized, right? So it's got to be handled pretty well, or we at least have to have a little bit of a better system for newcomers to come in and get some quick GRC to start, and have an influx. And I know faucets exist, but realistically, I mean, half of a grid coin after about a week on a faucet doesn't really solve that issue.
Isn't manual reward claim supposed to fix that?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Isn't manual reward claim supposed to fix that?
Oh, you mean like manual reward, like processing, like research reward?
Yeah, that was what was. That's
Yeah,
what
I
we were
mean,
talking about, right?
yes, right. But I'm saying is there's a whole intricate system of how GRC interacts with the platform, including things like voting. Like you need GRC to vote a very small amount,
That'll
but
solve the recency payment issue. In other words, you're having to wait a long time to get your GRC.
sorry, Jim, if you could repeat that.
GRC.
I did like how he was it was like compressing.
Uh,
As far as the voting is concerned, I think the voting power should be given to the miners.
Well, it's yeah. So I mean, I'm not saying the actual voting process costs a lot, because I mean, even someone with like 5 GRC might argue it costs a lot, but someone with 10 GRCs can be like, okay, it's like 4 decimal places down GRC, so it's dust, right? The problem is you get a lot of people who feel like, well, one, your voting weight is much less. Your voice is not really heard. Is definitely something that they might be concerned about. And then in addition to that, they can't create any polls. So even if they think their voice isn't being heard, maybe they want to create a poll about how their voice isn't being heard, and they can't do that. And even, I mean, I personally think the poll creation amount is pretty high, but I understand why it's high, so it doesn't get flooded, and we don't completely clog the system with polls. But yeah, I mean, we're going down a really sharp rabbit hole, because this is going to get into polling and newcomers and stuff. But I don't know. My opinion on the dynamic versus static, I honestly think that I wish we had a system very similar to Bitcoin, in that we kind of could control the inflation a little bit better by having a much smaller number in years to come, where it would be using a range system to reward research as opposed to a creation system. But I don't know.
So I actually agree with that, and I've in private discussions with different people, I've had similar ideas. I mean, I think the kitty can always be there, but I think we've got to start introducing more of a
Economical.
and a true economic approach to this, rather than just depending upon essentially the creation of coins to fund the research rewards. I mean, and it could take many different forms. I mean, there could be projects that are well endowed that actually have the funds to actually purchase GRC or exchange for GRC, and then in turn reward GRC directly to participants, which is really a form of rain. And that could be formalized in a bit more, it could be put into a bit more formal manner than the existing RAIN system is now. And quite frankly, it could be extended to support other computing domains besides BOINC. And probably I know that's a long way off, that vision, but that's probably where we need to head, because I don't believe we can depend upon inflation of the coin to do this. I don't think that's the right way to approach it at the end.
I think you're right. I mean, the white paper has that in there itself, the adding different platforms outside of BOINC. The way I see it is like, I agree with you guys that we need this ecosystem that adds value to the coin outside of the minting of a currency, but we're also minting a currency, and how that currency gets minted is important. If you look at the US dollar, for example, unless we want to switch to a commodity currency, which I don't think we should, but I mean, we can talk about that if we want, because Bitcoin is a commodity currency. But if we want to stick as a standard inflationary currency, protocol defined inflationary currency, how the currency is minted is fairly important. So we can have this range structure that you're talking about, where we create an economy around Gridcoin as a currency, as a protocol, but we still need a way to mint currency, just like there's an economy based around the US dollar, but there is still a way to mint US dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying get rid of all minting, and I'm not saying that should go away. I'm saying that the dual minting process of interest and generation can run away from us. I think that as more people come on, we obviously need to keep minting. We don't need to have a restricted amount, right? Does as long, I mean, it might be worth half of a cent, but if people have tons of it, what does it really matter, right? I mean, it's like the yen, right? It's like what's the proportion of a yen to a U.S. dollar, right? And is the smaller one considered less valuable, or do people just have more of one, right? You just have a higher currency. It's not bad. But what I'm saying is having it. I personally think having a dynamic creation method for interest that's based off of effectively like the amount that's either being burned or the number of people currently in the community or people or nodes in the network or whatever we want to do for activity. And it's based on, and generation of interest is based off of that. And then and then we kind of phase out or hope to try and significantly minimize the generation that's done via crunching. That's my future.
So DCY Matrix made a point about a voting pool. So I think I raised that possibility maybe a couple of weeks ago, or maybe at one of the hangouts. But I think it's possible actually to have if you have a group of people that together have over 100,000 Gridcoin, can we possibly have people pool their resources together and create a poll? This might be a bit tricky. The implementation might be a bit difficult, but I think it would seriously democratize the the current polling system. And the second point to add to that is that currently the way magnitude works is somebody can have like twice as much magnitude for crunching one project than another, and then if you get 600 something vote weight per magnitude. So if instead of getting 50 magnitude, you're getting 100 magnitude, the difference in that is like about 30,000 Gridcoin vote weight, which is really, really influential. 614, thank you, Barton. So 614 vote weight for every single unit of magnitude. And so, I mean, that can add up to like tens of thousands depending on who you are, where you are, etc. And that causes a massive difference in voting power. So that just goes back to the magnitude and economics. But regarding the voting pool, yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of that, and I think it would seriously democratize the network a lot.
Yeah, I think that would work. To bring it back into economics.
Sorry about
that.
Yeah,
what was the topic of tonight before we ran away with that?
No, it was magnitude and economics, and so that was somebody made the comment in the section. I think we should,
That was a good.
That was accidentally on topic.
No, well, I think it's very on topic, mainly because the generation of GRC is tied very strongly directly to the magnitude, right? And if we remove the generation of GRC to crunching, we're left with a rain system tied to magnitude.
Yeah.
And should we have a rain system tied to magnitude? The answer, if we have a rain system, I would say yes, right? You're doing more work, you should get more of the tip, right? It's like any kind of bartending service, right?
If you take generation away from crunching, we're any old blockchain.
That's what I think.
No, I'm saying take away from the generation, but not the ability to give as a result of crunching.
See, I don't think we should essentially eliminate the kitty. I think it needs to be there. We can talk about the magnitude of it, whether it's tied directly to the BOINC domain only, and then other computing domains that we add to Gridcoin don't use the kitty, but they use a rain method of distributing funds, that's a separate matter. Whether we allow, look, and right now, BOINC projects have the ability to rain additional funds if they want, right? Anybody can do that. To emphasize, any of the projects can do that to try and encourage computation. My sense is there's going to need to be, if we add more computing domains besides BOINC, and we decide whether we're going to use a kitty approach or whether we're going to use a rain approach, to be formal about it, there needs to be some sort of magnitude or computation calculation for each computing domain that someone participates in, so that there's a formal methodology on how they're going to get paid. Whether that comes from source funds that are distributed by the project or whether it comes from inflation, my belief is there needs to be rigor in how those computations are made and distributed. And yes, people that compute for a computing domain need to be rewarded in a formal manner in accordance with rules. And I believe those rules should be protocol rules. I do not believe that this should be the Wild West. I don't think that, projects should basically be able to freely choose, on an individual basis how they're going to award their computing GRC if they decide to rain them to people. That's just my own opinion, but I think there's got to be structure to it.
What if we no, because that makes a lot of sense, right? What if it was like what if we treated I'm probably gonna use this word wrong, but like what if we use the kitty, right? The magnitude generated GRC as a safety net under projects where it's a bare minimum of what a project receives, right? And the difference, like whatever someone provides for the rain system, the difference of what the normal compensation would be is given via the magnitude system, right?
We could do that. Yeah, we probably could do that with the. You have to change the algorithms a bit, but we could come up with something like that.
Are you also suggesting that maybe we have the protocol instead of using the kitty as the inflation tool, we have it create a pool of rain essentially as the inflation? That's the way the currency is minted and added to the ecosystem, and then that rain is distributed among the different computing projects.
Yeah, I mean, or you could think of it as an escrow approach, where a project that wants to fund its participants would essentially fund an escrow that would then be distributed to the project participants in a defined protocol, which might follow something very similar to the way the kitty currently operates. It's just not coming from inflation. The coins are not appearing out of existence from nowhere. Those coins already exist.
Yeah, I think there's two distinct things that we're talking about here. One is the utility aspect.
Yep.
And the other is a economic aspect, like the minting of a currency. And I think both are very valuable, but I think the critical one is the minting of the currency. The utility aspect can be built on top of Gridcoin, but if we don't have a clearly defined inflation system that says how much Gridcoin is minted per year, all this stuff that we sort of started breaking out with CBR, it's less encouraging for someone to build that utility platform on top of what we got, because it's like you said before, it's the Wild West.
But also, what system can you put in place, inflation-wise, that would make up for, the current distribution, right? So that's like, well, one thing is just to say it's a good idea, but the other thing is like, what would it be?
Well, I mean, one of the things that's interesting is that the current method of research rewards is inflation at a decreasing rate as time goes on, right? And then now we're getting deep into what we were discussing in the economics Slack channel a while back. And the same goes true of, the choice for CBR, because of implementation, we've chosen a constant CBR as part of the poll, when we made our choice. That because the number of grid coins is increasing as the total money supply, the percentage those are absolute numbers that then essentially become lower and lower percentage growth as the total money supply grows. And, so one of the things that we could do is go to a stepped approach or a dynamic approach where we actually increase the amount of GRC awarded to maintain a more constant inflation rate for research rewards over time. Now, that might not compensate for a massive increase in the number of people coming on the network, but at least it would adjust it to make sure that it's not deflationary, but you guys know what I mean, inflationary at a decreasing percentage as time goes on. So that's another idea.
Yeah, I've also thought about that as well, and so the question is, what exactly would that mechanism be? One way, or at least one way to approach the problem that would give you a lot more finer control over exactly what's going on would be to say, well, why don't we tie the amount of Gridcoin creation to the amount of computational power? And then as the computational power scales, the amount of Gridcoin minted scales. Now, of course, maybe we might want to change one thing or another. We might want to say, okay, well, we're minting, now we want to, shrink it by 50%, right? So we're going to, over time, we want to take like the logarithm over time or something like that. So, rather, so, we're, as the computational power increases, ideally, let's say the Gridcoin increases linearly, proportionally to it. But we could say, okay, well, maybe we don't really want to scale that much. Maybe a better idea would be to say, okay, why don't we, smooth it out, take the logarithm. Why don't we print a bit less, print just a tiny bit less, but still have it tied to the overall additional amount of computational power that's in the entire network.
I really love that idea to make. And by the way, you could come up with a transfer function, whether it's linear, whether it's logarithmic, whether it's some other shape that would be more appropriate and everyone would agree to it, right? So there's that. That's a very abstract thought, but there's that. But I think more importantly, we have to be able to actually measure computational power on a reasonable basis to be able to do that. And right now, as you know, the magnitude system is a bit of a punt, right? The reason that we use magnitude is precisely because every BOINC project measures computational power differently. And in fact, it's essentially arbitrary from project to project. And so because there is no effective real computation standard, our approach has been, well, we're just going to call it even Steven. We're going to take the 115,000, we're going to divide it up among all the active projects in an equal manner, and then we're going to scale the credits to the 115,000 divided by the number of projects, and then dole that out equally in kind based on people's actual contribution. But that's effectively in saying that there is no effective computation standard across the BOINC network, right? Because there's just no way to compute it. You don't know. I mean, think about it. The number of credits awarded by GPU Grid is and COLATS is like ridiculously high compared to the number of credits generated by I don't know, name one, like the LHC, right, which is really very low. And so, you can't directly compare those numbers. They're at arbitrary scales. Does everyone agree with me on that? So you'd have to come up with a way to really formalize the true computational power, and then you could actually do what you were describing. You could actually tie that to a much more sophisticated Gridcoin generation approach.
So that's another benefit, and I don't want to beat a dead horse because I know I've said this 1,000 times, but that would be another benefit of having a direct flop to GRC mechanism. Or we can add incentive structures on top of that if people want to say people should be incentivized to crunch smaller projects. But if we did have a flop to GRC mechanism, that playing around with any sort of increase in computational power would be a lot easier because it would already be quantified. So
I'm going to make a stronger statement. I think that's the only way to equitably and algorithmically base a dynamic Gridcoin generation approach that's fair to all individuals. Is it has to be based on the underlying utility, meaning what the resources and capabilities that are actually being used to do the computations. to me, that's the right way to look at it. And, so you've got to be able to get at the core of it. Okay, well, how much computational power is someone actually producing to be able to say, okay, well, this is how many additional GRC I ought to generate to reward that person appropriately. To me, you've got to go there to do it in a reasonable manner. Otherwise, in some way or another, you're going to introduce some sort of distortion to it, right? That's my take. So I really like the idea if we could come up with a way to really measure flops. I hate to be, crude. Yeah, crude about it, but
boy.
yeah, floppy boy. Exactly. You get the idea, right? We got to be able to come up with a candlestick that works, and it's not just like totally arbitrary like the existing credit system is in BOINC. And then we can have some real discussions around the reward algorithms that we're using for GRC. I don't know. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I remember. It's a shame Goblin Popper can't hear this. But I remember we were talking. Jay Ringo, Goblin, and I. We were talking. This must have been a couple of months back, but about the different ways that we value Gridcoin. And so I was, the push that I've been making and the perspective that I had was that the creation of Gridcoin should be tied to the actual, flops, and which is directly related to the energy consumption, as in you could directly tie the amount of Gridcoin to, a $sign amount of energy that it costs to create it. And so that is what fundamentally gives Gridcoin its value. And then Jay Ringo, and then Jay Ringo and Goblin also had other perspectives. Jay Ringo, I think Goblin had a more of a commodity perspective, like how can we actually use this as a currency? And in Jay Ringo, I forget exactly what yours was, but it was something related.
When I see Steemit posts that have come online where people say I'd rather go buy, I find it's better to go buy Gridcoin than it is to go compute, because I can't pay my power bill with the GRC, and I'm worried that as more people come on, I'm going to get less and less. That's the kind of stuff that worries me. It starts to work against the true purpose of what we're about, which is to encourage scientific computation, right?
But if they buy Gridcoin, that drives the price up.
It does. So
then
I agree.
Rewards us for computing. I mean, it's a self-normalizing situation, but it doesn't fully self-normalize right now because we have so many people who are just boinking anyway, regardless of whether or not they get Gridcoin, who just kind of consider Gridcoin to be kind of a free bonus, right?
Yep, that's right.
I mean, BOINC has been around for a lot longer. So, I mean, that's how I came into this. Gridcoin was free and cool bonus for boinking, which I was doing already,
I was boinking since the beginning. I've been doing SETI since '99, whenever the original thing came out, and then I did BOINC when it first came out, when they replaced the original SETI client back in, what was it, 2006 or 5? I can't remember, but yeah, it's a long time ago. It's been around forever. And then, so you're right. And there's lots of people. What is it? BOINC still has, what is it, over 400,000 active users, or more than that, maybe 450, something like that. The active meaning they're actually really participating. 4 million total, I think. So it's a big universe.
I don't think it's necessary that everyone who wants Gridcoin needs to compute, partly because of what Snip just said about, well, if people are buying into this economic system, then the value goes up and that helps other people crunch. You don't need to necessarily crunch. But also because you don't need the currency to be minted by every person in an economy. And the US is minted by one group of people. And then it gets out to the rest of the ecosystem just naturally. So, I mean, it would be nice if everyone was actually their own bank, but we're not there yet, even with blockchain. But having that system decentralized into a trustless entity or several trustless entities is still very, very good. And we could get to a point where it's similar to what happened to Bitcoin, where the idea of Bitcoin was, everyone is their own bank. You all participate in securing this ledger, which rewards you with this currency. Well, what happened is it turns out to be 5 groups of people ended up securing the ledger, giant mining farms, and they were rewarded with the currency. And then the currency still gets out into the ecosystem because people actually use it to buy things that spreads it around, or people use it as a speculative vehicle. And I think the former is going to increase. People are going to increasingly start to use it. And I think that ties back into what you guys were talking about earlier about making a system where we can use Gridcoin and help spread it around the ecosystem through the RAIN system. But
I'd love it if I could buy my groceries with Gridcoin.
Me too.
it would be awesome.
I agree.
But the moral of the story there is it's a pretty big ramble, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, I think, and it's not entirely impossible to eventually see a system where it's just it's not as practical to boink on a PC anymore because there are 100 or 200 fairly large boinking farms that are distributed around the world that are doing most of the minting. And then it's more difficult to actually be a PC, like at-home minter of Gridcoin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The currency itself would still mostly be minted by doing signs, so.
Yeah, they would still be doing the boink work. Just wouldn't, like, I won't be able to do it on my Xeons here. Like, it's just being practical.
I don't like it. It doesn't feel right to me, but yeah, I it could happen, right? But
yeah, me neither. I'm not saying I like it, but I think it is the same possibility.
Yep. And by the way, I agree with the idea of look, getting people to buy the coin puts investment pressure on it. It's going to raise the value of it. But I think, look, that gets in the same that alone, without having an economy aspect to the coin, I think gets starts to head in the Bitcoin territory in terms of the value of the coin being propped up simply by investment pressure, which is also not a good thing, right? So we have to. And by the way, Bitcoin's wild increase in its valuation has actually hurt the economy aspects of the coin, right? People don't want to spend Bitcoin if it's wildly fluctuating in value, because you realize you feel like you're gonna get hosed if you paid for something while the Bitcoin's purchasing power was low, and then all of a sudden it goes up, or stuff like that. It's so. The stability of a coin's value and its use as a currency is in tension with the investment aspects of the coin to a degree, which is something we have to think through. And that's afflicting Bitcoin right now, quite frankly, and some of the other currencies. So,
yeah, I agree, though. I would not call Bitcoin's a commodity in my mind.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Yeah, so we have that special tool. We have inflation to sort of help that. But other than that, I completely agree.
They have anti-inflation. They have a hard limit that they've imposed. It's gonna. I don't think they even know what's going to happen as they approach the block creation limit or whatever.
Bitcoin is gold.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is silver.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think does anyone else have any thoughts about what we talked about? I think we've first, I think this is a very long conversation to have in the community, and I think it's great that we're starting it now, if not earlier, because I know it's been part of the community for a while. If anyone listening wants to participate, join the economics channel on Slack or any of the social outlets here, Discord, Telegram. Just have the conversation. The economics channel will be the most focused one, probably, just because it's an economics channel.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Galvin, what do you think? Huh?
I think Jim's onto something, right? I think the whole premise that he was referring to in the last, what was it, 25 minutes, makes a lot of sense. It just works, you know what I mean? Of course, we have to obviously work out the finer details, but yeah.
Well done. The so yeah, I was sort of summing up when you came back, but feel free to jump in at any point when I'm doing this. Right, so I think we made two pretty clear distinctions between the minting of a currency and then the creation of a ecosystem around using that currency through something like Rain. I think they're both great ideas personally. The Rain one, that I think the minting currency is required. I don't think we should get rid of that because that would turn this into a commodity.
I agree.
So it's just a question of how do we want to incorporate the two in the single protocol, if we even want to incorporate the two. How do we want to define how much GRC is minted now that we know with the CBR proposal, we decided of the GRC minted, how much is going to research, how much is going to staking. Now, the question is how much GRC should be minted in that kitty, or not in that kitty, in the overall ecosystem, in the staking section and the kitty. And then how, if at all, do we want to build this Rain system where either maybe some grid coin is minted by the protocol for raining, and that's a way to create the currency, or it's an escrow account where projects donate, kind of like what we've talked about with microgrid in the past, but on a much larger scale.
I would think it should be effectively a programmatically managed escrow account, if that's even possible, where effectively it's like, we set up this wallet address for you. Every time you want to make a rain, just send it to this address, and it'll rain based off of the magnitude and who's crunching and all that. Is that possible with the current infrastructure, or is it even feasible with a slight workaround? Or I'll take silence as a yes.
I think it's possible.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, we could also just have like one or two people be like, okay, that's for that project, and just manage it, right? That's not too much, but it just
Right, I see. Well, right now you rain just by having Gridcoin and saying, who was it?
Also, did we explain what the rain system was, or did we just say the rain system, rain system, rain system?
I don't think we explained it.
Yeah, I know we have in several videos past, which is why it's like when you're watching like a show. The recap can only cover so much, but yeah. So in short, the rain system, for anyone's listening who doesn't already know, the rain system is a concept. It's a program actually already created, simple Python script that allows pretty much, you give it a bunch of GRC, like say 100 GRC. And there's 10 people processing your project as a tip, like, thanks for doing this, right? They get rewarded obviously for crunching and for staking and all that. But as an added tip, the person's allowed to literally like make it rain, like make it like that song about modest women. And so you make it rain, right? Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of cutting in this one.
I'm keen with that.
So projects aren't required to do the rain system. It's more or less something that a lot of the smaller projects like to thank users for. Obviously, World Community Grid probably doesn't really even know the rain system exists. But then you have projects like, I don't know if SourceFinder did it, but where the actual developer is much more involved with GRC, because GRC and the Gridcoin community are doing so much, like such a high percentage of processing for them, that they feel like tipping us. What I'd like to see is in the future is super small projects use the rain system to kind of encourage and thank people for doing,
I think we could do an escrow thing, and we could probably, the nodes that participate in neural network and consensus, when we replace that with the C++ version, we could probably come up with something where a consensus could actually vote on dispersing the funds from a common account and then initiate it. One of the nodes then, like staking, would initiate a transaction which would essentially disperse the funds. I bet that's possible. I'd have to think through it. I bet Broad would come up with a good system to do that. But I think it's actually possible to do something like that. Any comments on that one?
I don't know enough.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But as it stands right now, I think it would be cool to automate. I mean, what you said earlier about the rules being put into protocol and everything being put in protocol, I'm on board.
Yeah, I just think it makes me nervous to have. I think look, every project or computing domain that wants to participate should decide how much they want to contribute. And by the way, if it's keyed to flops, like, you've got floating, we really can get down to a standard. They can define a candlestick saying, I'm willing to pay X number of GRC per flop, and then they deposit the money in the escrow account. And then via protocol, we determine how many flops are working on by person on that particular computing domain, and then we disperse the funds accordingly from the escrow account. Right? So that to me, that's very rigorous in terms of how it's done. I don't know. That was really a little bit more fleshed out version of my idea, but
I think that would work. I think Wolf's question from earlier is pretty relevant there, and he asked, would projects be required to do this RAIN system?
I see it. Yeah.
What scares me is creating a pay-to-play system where you have to contribute to this escrow account. So one of the beautiful things that we are able to do is our own transaction ledger, which is a blockchain, is we can mint our currency and distribute it that way. We can, out of thin air, create this note of value instead of having to have people pay and then distribute that, have people pay into an escrow account and then have that distributed across the people who participate. We just have this protocol that mints a currency and distributes it, kind of like the way the currency US dollars are distributed among banks. We distribute among people who contribute to science.
That's why I think the kitty cannot go away. I think there's always got to be a minimum, whether we change from a constant to some sort of a variable approach for rewarding GRC from minted coins. I think that's got to be part of the minimum floor of whatever final protocol we come up with. I think it would be terrible to eliminate that. I think it's a very bad idea to eliminate that.
Yeah, I don't think we can ever truly 100% get rid of it, right? But what I will say is you're right, Jiringo. I mean, as a scientific open source community, I think it would almost, I don't want to say immoral, that's kind of, that's a little harsh, but I do think it's not in our regular normal nature to have a pay-to-play kind of system where we say, you got to make, you don't have to make it rain, but you probably should, wink wink, if you want to ride the ride kind of thing. But what I would like to actually see is probably that escrow account set up per project, where we can say, this is like a museum. We recommend you donate to the community. You don't have to. And then we advertise the address to the community as well that says, if you would like to help fund this project, feel free to donate, right? And if you'd like to donate to the project's processing, donate. And there can be it's a very simple mathematical algorithm that would figure out the math of, how many flops are expected for this project to cost and how much GRC. So what is the flop to GRC ratio of how many GRC is someone getting paid per flop or something similar like that, where as it grows, we're encouraging more people to hop on and do it. And so by kind of donating to that project escrow account, you are effectively helping donate and get their processing done faster. I'm not saying put it all on the person who created the project and the scientist, but I think saying you can, and also if you'd like to ship this out to your friends and encourage them to donate as well, it'll get done faster. That's just really how the community works. Otherwise, people will do it, it'll just take longer.
Yeah, and if anyone's playing bingo, get out your bingo cards.
What did I say? What did I say this time?
Well, I'm about to bring up the treasury because what you just
Oh! I thought I said something. I was like, what? Moral corruption is not something I bring up that often.
We should really make these bingo cards.
Chocolate, get on.
But yeah, it's a way. I don't think we should get rid of the kitty, at least at this time. But a way we could do it is to build this sort of treasury system where, let's say, all GRC is minted for securing the blockchain, but there's a part of the protocol that takes a little bit of every minted GRC and puts it into an escrow account, and you get to vote on where that which project you get to choose which project your GRC goes to in terms of which one you're supporting, and that is the rain account for that project. So you're still minting a currency, and you're not making people pay for it, and you're also doing a rain system.
Does it rain evenly?
So what?
Does it rain evenly on all the users?
It rains based on magnitude.
Right. So equal is the question of equality is an interesting one, right? So.
Well, I mean, if it's based on magnitude, it's still fair.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about magnitude is you can't argue that you deserve more for doing a tenth of the work, right?
No.
Like, I really like the magnitude system because it's like, here's a it's fair in that nobody is able to, like, it doesn't matter how much GRC you have, right? Like, money doesn't affect that and all that fun stuff, right? This is a very fair setup system. So I feel like crunching and rain are fairly set up. Or set up fairly.
That's true. And by the way, the magnitude system that we have currently is the fairest way that you can think of to distribute research rewards, given that each project has an arbitrary computation scale. There's really, I can't think of a fairer way to do it than we're already doing it, given the limitations of the way BOINC projects currently set up their credit system, right? So until we come up with a flop-based approach where we can really define a true candlestick for computation power, the existing magnitude approach is the best we got.
Flops are a little weird though too. I mean,
oh yeah.
I mean, Raspberry Pis, right, have their use, but they certainly don't have that many flops.
Yeah.
I reach one magnitude after, I think my max is actually, it sits almost exactly, my Pi sits almost exactly at one magnitude.
One unit, right?
On the dot, right?
Yeah.
Which means I get about a quarter GRC per day, every day I leave it running. But it's also running the test net, so, results may vary. But yeah, I don't know.
And quite frankly, even if we move to a flop system, we probably want to normalize those units and still keep a magnitude system of sorts to normalize the units better. But it would probably be calibrated based on the underlying flops. I'd have to think through the math on that, and maybe I like chocolate could do better than me on that one. But it makes sense to have a conveniently referenceable scale for rewarding of GRC. By the way, something that Ravon and I were talking about was actually changing the magnitude units from the total magnitude amount from 115,000 to 100,000, just to make it a more reasonable numbers, like 115. You guys were talking about the history of where 115 came from, and why 115,000? Like, right?
I can answer that question actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was put into place to replace a previous system, and whoever put it in decided that they just wanted to freeze everything where it was, and 115 was the number that froze everything where it was. So that was the number that
used. And it stuck, and so now we just recalibrate everything to that number. That's right.
That would be reasonable.
Quick question, actually. So the way we calculate magnitude and a straight flop, instead of like using magnitude, we just pretty much equate it to straight flops. Would there be any difference? Because we don't have a question, but we have a comment by how Nix. I these names. Tell me. So yeah, we have a question in the chat of just like, even if it was flops, we'd still be having this discussion. And I just kind of want to verify that of, would there be any difference in this discussion if we did a straight flop as opposed to a magnitude conversion?
I think there would, because I think essentially what happens is that, right now we're taking each project, right, some projects are mainly GPU based and other projects are mainly CPU based, and we're essentially taking, like, how many projects are there active right now? Like 22 or 23, right? So we take the 115,000 and we divide it by 23, and we don't really, we're normalizing the credits in each one of those to basically 1/23 of 115,000. But we really don't know whether there's truly a lot more computation going on from a true computation perspective in one of those than the other. We know some of them, we know there's more users, some of them we know there's in terms of the number of people that are participating, but there's no real way to tell whether that really represents more or less computational power than one of the other projects. And so that's the problem with the approach that we use with the current magnitude is, given that we cannot calibrate the credit scales for each project or compare them to each other, we just punt and say, okay, we're going to make it even Steven for every one of them and divide by how many ever projects, and that's it. The ability to use a flop candlestick would allow us to not do divide by 23, but instead distribute the magnitude pool in accordance with the true computation proportion that each project is actually attracting.
Okay, so with the example being the difference between like asteroids, right, which is fairly common, low to like mid to low processing power per unit, and then something like the conjecture? Was it Colta's?
Yeah, Collat's conjecture, right?
Yeah, which
big one.
Holy crud, right? It tells my Pi it'll take like 24 hours. It'll take it like a week and a half, right, to do one unit. And if I put it on my computer, it says it's going to take something stupid like 2 days. And so with those, the person who finishes one unit of the conjecture will get paid based off of the flops of that, and the person from the asteroids would have to do several work units until they pretty much equal that number of flops to get the same amount. Is that?
Yep.
Okay. So that sounds a lot more interesting than the newer ones having. So that would take away with the new project with no one in it. Everyone gets massive magnitude to start off, and it would kind of do away with that, wouldn't it?
That's right, because it would be really based on the true amount of computation power that's devoted to the project, not the fact that just that project automatically, as soon as it goes on the whitelist, it gets 1/23 or 1/24 of the magnitude. And if there are only 3 people participating in it, then those 3 people share 115,000 divided by 3. You know what I mean? That's not a very good corner case. Then that's the corner case that we currently have. If there are only 3 people participating on a brand new project, it shouldn't get very many magnitude points. You see what I'm saying? So I think a flop-based approach, flop itself may not be the right unit. I may be misspeaking, and I like Chocolate may have some better, or you guys may have some better ideas on how to create a candlestick that would be fair. What I'm talking about is a fair computational candlestick that's not arbitrary, that could be used to more equitably distribute magnitude units. That's essentially my idea.
Chocolate, before you go, just go, and then we're going to start wrapping up a little bit because we are reaching towards the end of the show.
Got it. So I was just wondering. So in my original proposal, I made an equivalence between CPU flops, FP32 flops, and FP64 flops. And so are the concerns regarding the fairness of flops not addressed by those, like the concerns that you guys are bringing up? I
think they are, actually. Your proposal, if I remember it right, I think they're addressed, but I don't know. I'd like we should get comments from other people.
I agree with Jim. I think you should keep working on your proposal.
Yeah, you should set up an escrow account so people can like reward you for working on it.
Yeah.
No, I
right.
mean that it's kind of it is kind of bringing what we were saying kind of back, but at the same time, it's like realistically, you're working on a proposal to benefit the actual community, even though it's not coding. As long as there's some kind of progress and proof that you're working on it, I feel like that's worthy of some kind of escrow or some kind of like bounty or something.
I think it's very valuable, actually.
I mean, I am learning to code for one, so that's hopefully maybe I'll one day be able to contribute. So I have been thinking about ways to actually get that done, and so I brought up the hardware profiling database, which would be a way to measure, try to make equal the contributions. But then the problem was, well, how do you make that? How can you have a hardware profiling database that isn't centralized and isn't controlled by some people? And I do have an answer to that, but Jimingo, did you want to? I mean, yeah, we could talk about it like after we wrap up. But I have a suggestion.
What a good teaser for the after party.
Yeah. I want to hear this.
Yeah, and we should do a whole show on it because I know you are going to get into it and you and Jim are just going to go nuts. So we don't have time for that. So we will wrap it up here. Hownix, you're going to have the closing comment here. He said, my concern is the difference between a project-centric and cruncher-centric system. The current system encourages people to work on projects which are being crunched less. So that ties into how we distribute magnitude evenly across projects. And we actually talked about that, I think, in episode 5. Which is called Magnitude Economics. So if you want to learn more about magnitude, more about what Jim was talking about with regards to why we have it, as sort of a way to even out everything across the board projects, and also a little bit about what Hownix just mentioned, go back, and it's called Magnitude Economics, and I think it's episode 5. Other than that, this was a great conversation. I'll mention again the economics channel on Slack, where economics conversations live. But of course, you can always just talk anywhere you want. We got Discord, Telegram, Slack. These are questions that need more exploration and that we need to come to a consensus on as a community. Not anytime necessarily soon, but eventually. We need to decide what we're minting, how we're minting, and how we can continue to build the ecosystem of Gridcoin into something that is both sustainable, beneficial, and something that works for its main purpose, which is to serve as a transaction ledger that advances science and data analysis, at least in some way. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you everyone for coming. We will see you next Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern. We do not know what topic it's going to be. And as always, if you want something discussed, feel free to reach out to me, Chocolate, or Goblin, and we will put it on the schedule. So yeah, have a great weekend, everyone.